What is going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the Met Central podcast, episode number 95. And it's the off season, unfortunately, as we are going to have to find conversations, honestly, to discuss more. The Mets, of course, made some coaching changes last week. Matt will give some of his thoughts since he wasn't here, and we'll kind of talk about those things more. Talk about the season as a whole. David Stearns spoke to the media. We'll talk about a few things there, and I just want to start, of course, by saying that now that the offseason is here, in case anyone is wondering what's going to happen content wise here on the channel, our goal is to put out episodes every single Tuesday for you guys. There might be times where we sneak some episodes in between. If there's news, of course, throughout the off season, we will go live to talk about it depending on no matter what day of the week it is. So if the Mets go out and sign a player, trade for a player, whatever it may be, we will go live to talk about that, do a deep dive, of course. And then maybe we'll bring some guests on. So for this week, like I said, we're gonna just kind of do an open panel discussion, if you will. Just talk about, like I said, the things I mentioned before. And next week, maybe we'll get into some player grades, and then we'll figure out as we go throughout the offseason how we're going to deep dive into things. Because unfortunately, like I mentioned, it is a longer offseason than we would have liked going into the year. But before we jump into everything, I ask that you please leave a like on your way into the episode here. Subscribe if you guys are new to the channel, especially if you're Met fans, and turn on your notifications so you know when we upload or go live here on the channel. Now, like I said, some coaching changes happened a little bit ago. Matt, unfortunately, you were not here to join Carson and I on the Rip Chavez to shreds panel that we had last week. And how are we feeling though? We'll deep dive obviously more into the coaching, but just initial thoughts there and just a general with the team as a whole, as like I said, unfortunately with the offseason is going to be quite a long offseason.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, because like I said, I wasn't here for the last episode, and I wasn't here for the last couple like post game shows. Obviously, you did a great job of covering those games, and unfortunately covering game 162 where the Mets lost and then the Reds lost speaks so that they couldn't make the playoffs, and it's unfortunate. But before we actually get into the discussion, and I know Ray brought this up right now in the comment section, but yeah, I mean, just I know like we put in a lot of work and stuff, but really it's down to you guys. You guys are the reason why we do this. We want to, we want, like we always say for every episode, we want to keep feeding you guys content throughout, every day throughout the regular season and, even towards the future seasons, hopefully, next year, the year after that, and the year after that. But yeah, just thank you guys for your support because like I said, we wouldn't be doing this if it wasn't for you guys, because, you guys are always here. You guys are always hitting the like button. You guys are always, hitting the notification bell. You guys are always subscribing. So, yeah, thank you guys very much. And I know it was a disappointing season. I'm sure you guys are all disappointed like me and Evan are. But, it is the off season now. So, yeah, I mean, let's get into this, get into these couple discussion points. Yeah, listen, with the coaching staffs, right? I mean, who's not happy that Eric Chavez isn't gone? I mean, again, like we've stated many times before, it's like there needed to be changes. And listen, it's unfortunate that there weren't changes during the regular season because maybe if there were changes at the end of June or maybe early July, maybe this team could have actually turned it around. Maybe the offense could have been a bit more consistent. And maybe we could have actually seen this team, in the playoffs. And maybe they could have had a better shot of, if they did get into the playoffs, they could have, had a better shot of, beating a team like the Dodgers or maybe, like the Dodgers are playing the Phillies right now. Maybe the Mets could have had, again, a better opportunity to beat the Phillies in the NLDS. But listen, it did not happen. And obviously, there's a couple other coaching changes as well. Obviously the main one being Chavez. And like I said before, I'm very happy with that. But, Jeremy Barnes also went. It was time for him to go. He's been here since 2021. I believe he was hired under Jared Porter. So again, his time ran its course. Jeremy Hefner, of course, he got fired. So, unfortunate for him. I'm sure, I know he's had his flaws and he's had his ups and downs here. He's been here since 2020, but I'm sure he'll find, another job. Obviously, Glenn Sherlock, he also retired. Then was John Gibbons. He ended up leaving through mutual consent. And then, of course, everyone's favorite third base coach, Mike Sarba, he ended up leaving as well through I believe it was mutual consent, or I believe it was a contract termination. Either way, all those guys are gone. The main one that we all wanted to stick around was Anton Richardson, and of course, he fully deserved it because I mean, when you turn a guy like Juan Soto into what I believe his career high before the season was, I believe 10 or 11 stolen bases, when you almost turn Juan Soto into a 40-40 player, I mean, you're doing a pretty good job. And also, the Mets are also one of the better teams in terms of actually stealing bases this year, which has, when you compare it to the previous years of like 22, 23, and even 24 last year, the Mets were nowhere near the top of the league in terms of, actually being a competent team and stealing bases. So good that Anton Richardson is sticking around. Obviously, like I said, he deserved it. And I mean, listen, the main one, and I'm sure we'll talk about it more on this episode, but because David Stearns, he did confirm it that Carlos Mendoza would be staying along for the next season. And look, I know for you and me, I know we were both on the train of firing Carlos Mendoza, because of course, he's had a terrible year this year with just a ton of, just weird decisions, specifically with the bullpen. And, that's something that carried over from 2024 into 2025. But look, for me, even though I wanted Carlos Mendoza gone, I can at least understand why David Stearns wanted to keep him, because at the end of the day, it is his guy. He's he ended up hiring him. So I can at least live with it. And the other reason for me why I can at least live with it, because I said, if Carlos Mendoza is going to stay, then the other coaches around him need to go. And listen, for Mendoza for next year, he's going to be on the hot seat because, like I said, he's going to have a whole new coaching staff. I'm sure he's going to have a say in terms of who the the other coaches are in terms of hitting coach, pitching coach, bench coach as well. So listen, for Mendoza, there is no excuse. And this is something that I also mentioned before, but unlike going into the 2024 season where, the 2023 season was a disaster and the expectations kind of dropped a little bit, because if you guys remember, 2024 was supposed to be more of a transition year, and the Mets obviously, went to the NLCS that year. But I know this season was a disaster, right? I mean, there's no other way to put it. But next year, unlike 2024, next year the expectations again will be to make a deep run into the playoffs. So for Mendoza, like I said, he's going to be on the hot seat, and there's no excuses for Mendoza. It's put up or shut up time for him.
Yeah, and that's why when Carson and I were talking about, potentially with the bench coach option since Gibbons ended up stepping aside, that's why I was saying that the next guy they're bringing in as a bench coach is going to be, it has to be someone that is going to be able to step in and be the manager if they make a midseason firing. And I think that depending on who they hire, it's going to tell us a lot on how much Mendoza is truly on the hot seat or not. Because if they go with a guy that, kind of doesn't have experience, like I know we've talked about Beltran before, who maybe could be a manager, and maybe they do feel comfortable with that idea. To me, it says more that maybe Mendoza's not on the hot seat as much as we think. Rather, if they bring in someone that, has managerial experience. I'm just throwing a name out there. I'm not saying this is the guy, but like Ron Washington, if he comes in as the bench coach, has managerial experience, and is a veteran guy, maybe that tells us, okay, Mendoza truly is on the hot seat going into next year. And to me, he should be. And this is where David Stearns, who talked about in the media, I regret not being proactive enough and being a little too reactive. This is where you have a chance to back that up. And I want to see that going into next year. Well, I shouldn't say I want to, because I don't want the Mets to be in a spot where they have to fire Carlos Mendoza. But if they are in a spot where they, it seems like, okay, they're kind of starting off slow, even if they're like a 500 club or just above, to me, it needs to be like super quick. And that would tell me David Stearns learned his lesson this year about being proactive. Now, the thing is, was he talking about that? Was he talking about, not being aggressive with calling up Noel McLean earlier or other roster moves? We don't know. But all I know is that hopefully he did learn his lesson, because the thing that I was reiterating the entire time on the episode talking about the firing of Chavez and the other coaches, my biggest problem still was the fact that it should have been done earlier. It should have been done. To me, I kept pointing to that Pirate series when they got swept as that was your chance to fire him. You were on a huge losing streak, and before that, you got like 2 or 3 wins in like 13 games or whatever it was, and two of them against the Braves and one of them against the Phillies, I believe, in that span. To me, that was your opportunity to be proactive and fire the hitting coach just to send a message. And again, we talked about it ad nauseum throughout the season. Who knows if it would have done anything? We never will know now. But you had to try at least something, and they just didn't. And hopefully that's something Stearns learns his lesson from.
Yeah, I think with the like you broke with the bench coach decision, I think that's going to be in my. I mean, I know. Listen, every other coach, like hitting coach, pitching coach, third base coach, those are going to be important hires. But I believe, like you said, whoever is going to be the bench coach, I believe that to me is going to be the most important hire because, like you said, if it's a guy with more experience, like a guy like Ron Washington, then it tells you more that, and like you said, Mendoza is more on the hot seat. But if it's more like a guy like Carlos Beltran, which listen, I wouldn't be opposed to a guy like Carlos Beltran because I know obviously he was hired to be the Mets manager for the 2020 season, but with the whole Astro scandal coming out, of course, he got fired and he got let go. But listen, again, like I would like Beltran, and I know he's worked in the I believe in the Mets front office for a couple of years now, and he has some good friendships and good work relationships with some of the players as well on the team. Guys like Lindor and Juan Soto, especially guys like the better Hispanic players on the Mets team as well. But to me, I would be like I said, I would like Beltran, but I would also be a little bit hesitant to hire Beltran as the bench coach just because I'm really listen. And like I said, I don't have a lot of faith in Mendoza, so I want that emergency backup blanket just in case. And again, like if you're going to hire Beltran, let's say, and now he takes over as the manager, like halfway through the season so far, that's another guy who's a rookie manager. And again, we just came off a rookie manager in Carlos Mendoza who made these mistakes, and like we say, he's made those mistakes in his rookie year in 2024. The mistakes got even worse last year in 2025. And again, like 2026, like we said, there is no excuse for Carlos Mendoza. So how much is he going to learn from 2025 and 2024 his rookie year? Because if he's carrying over these mistakes from these last 2 years into 2026, where, like I said again, the expectations will be high next year. The expectations will be to make a deep playoff run because I anticipate that this will be an aggressive offseason coming off a disastrous regular season 2025. If those same mistakes carry over and we don't see Mendoza learning, I'm sorry, then at that point, you have to be on the hot seat and your job has to be in danger. So, like I said, whoever they hire as the bench coach, it's going to be very telling. And it's like you stated, it's going to be very telling how Stearns and the front office feels about Carlos Mendoza and pretty much how much of a leash they want to give him going into next year. Oh God, Andrew, don't. Why are you doing this to us?
Yeah, we already are treading the game tonight, and this guy has to come in here. But hey, the Rangers, I'm sure, will start 3-0, and then the fans will think that, oh, we're back, and whatever. We're not going to talk about hockey. But either way, I just want to get to a couple of comments here. Seeing that Eric Chavez has been let go tweet made me feel as ecstatic as a kid on Christmas morning. Now the issue becomes who replaces him, and that's something that Carson and I got into a little bit of potentially options. Honestly, we're not too sure outside of them promoting the guy from AAA. Keep forgetting his name,
Yeah,
JP.
JP Arnsebia, something like that.
Yeah, we've talked about him as potentially an option, and Francisco Alvarez gave a lot of praise to him about the work that he did down in AAA when he went down there, because crazy concept when you actually have a player using their main hit tool to their advantage. I know that Eric Chavez would never understand that concept. Outside of that, to be honest with you, I have no clue, but all I know is that, and I know it's hard right now to trust David Stearns based on what this season ended up being, but all you could do is trust whoever he hires, because this was the conversation that we got into as well. It bothers me so much. Like, the thing that annoys me the most with Stearns is from the get-go, he should have cleaned the coaching staff entirely and brought in his own guys. To me, it never made sense to keep guys from previous regimes. And I know that he took the blame, and I appreciate him saying, oh, 2 years is enough to have my fingerprints all over it. I don't want to blame anyone from, previous regimes. And even though I inherited parts, it's on me. Well, it's on you as well for letting yourself inherit those coaches. And I just still can't fathom why he ended up doing that. But what's done is done now, I guess. And now we have to trust that whoever he brings in, pitching coach wise, hitting coach wise, pitching coach wise, I'll definitely feel confident more so just because of the fact that we've seen how good the pitching has been in AAA, and we've seen how good in Milwaukee the pitching has been, just getting the most out of that. But hitting wise, I still have my questions, just given the fact that we have seen, some questionable decisions in that regard in the past. Whether you look at Milwaukee, just questionable, or I should say questionable lineups, but you know, incomplete lineups, if you will, over in Milwaukee at times. But that remains to be seen. And overall, in general, I mean, the thing he preached the most during that media conference was run prevention. And if you could shore up the defense, and this is something that I talked about a lot throughout this season, and I talked about a lot when the season wrapped up, that the difference between last year's team defensively and this year's team defensively, it was, and I don't know if there's numbers to back it up, but from the eye test, this team was far worse defensively than last year's team was defensively. And if you could shore that up a little bit, that will help your pitchers out as well, because you can't have guys like Jose Siri dropping routine fly balls out in center field. You can't have Luis Angel Acuna in the opening week, missing throws over the first base. Pete Alonso, if he comes back, having him miss throws, which is also where, you question, what's the roster construction going to be? If Pete Alonso comes back, is he viewed more as the DH? Are they going to move someone from the outfield to first base, which would be interesting if they moved a guy like Nimmo or Soto to first base? But I think the conversation's realistic because you want to be a stronger defensive team in the areas that are more important, like in your corner outfields, because that was an area that was really just the weakest, in my opinion.
So yeah, like just going back a little bit to what you were saying about the coaching staffs and how Stearns made the mistake of not clearing house pretty much when he first came in the 2023 offseason going into the 2024 offseason. And listen, I agree with that point. If it was me making those decisions, I would have completely cleared house in terms of the coaching staff. I understand from his point of view though where he was coming, and I know people will say like, oh, but he hired. I mean, was not hired. He fired Buck after the 2023 season. So why was there no other changes to like the hitting coaches or the pitching coaches or like the bench coach per se? I think the difference though with Buck was, I think, because Buck was more of that veteran, older presence type, and I know that we mostly know that Buck is anti-analytics. He's not completely anti-analytics. He does like to use them a little bit, but he's not mainly focused on that. He's more of that old school manager, feel type of managing, which is that's his thing. He came from a past generation from where that's just how managers used to manage. But then going back to the other coaching staffs. For me, I think he was looking at it from a point of view of saying, okay, like, because remember, 2024 was supposed to be a transition year. So I feel like he was saying, okay, we have a coaching staff already. We're going to a year where technically we're not supposed to compete yet. I mean, obviously we're going to try to win games, but the main goal wasn't at least to make the playoffs. It was just to see, where this roster was and how can we change, come after this year and going into the future. So I think what he was trying to do was he was trying to evaluate everyone on the coaching staff, see, okay, which guys are good at their job, and then which guys are not great at their job, and which guys can I look to improve upon going into the next offseason. But and again, when you look at the 2024 season and you saw how bad they started out, because I mean they were one of the worst teams in baseball. I believe if that stretch continued and we went into that offseason with the Mets not making the playoffs, I believe you would have seen mass changes to the coaching staff. But because they went on that deep run and they turned it around and they went to the NLCS, I think Stearns looked at it from a point of view. It's like, okay, we made this deep run. I don't really want to change too much. So let's see how this coaching staff goes into the next year. And then we obviously saw how it was just an unmitigated disaster because, again, The Mets were not a great offensive team. Their pitching, even though it was fantastic throughout the first couple months, because I believe through the first 3 months they were pitching to like just above a 2 ERA, which I know wasn't sustainable, but it was just amazing how well most of these pitchers were pitching to. And I mean, when you look at other guys like Tyler McGill and Griffin Kennedy, they were pitching well above what we expected. And then obviously injuries hit midseason, and then obviously the pitching just fell completely to the ground in the second half. And it was one of the main reasons why this team missed the playoffs, because guys like Sean Manaea, Kodai Senga, and even Frankie Montas, they were just they were unmitigated disasters. But then the other thing you pointed to was the defense. And this team was one of the worst defensive teams probably in the league. I know we don't have any stats to back that up, but just by the eye test and watching it, I mean, there were so many times where this team just couldn't make the simple routine plays. I mean, just throws to first base, simple scoops, simple just the ball being hit to you on the infield ground, and they're not able to catch, or simple fly balls to the outfield, not being able to catch those, or even hitting even hitting your cutoff man. I mean, how many times did we see Mets outfielders miss their cutoff man, or even guys like the pitchers or the catchers miss backing up throws, and then that caused runners on the other team to get more bases out of those plays. So, and listen, every little mistake you make on the defensive front, that impacts your team on how many runs you give up, and how many hits you give up. And ultimately, like I said, the defense along with the pitching and even the hitting, I mean, listen, everything pretty much went wrong for this team, and that's why this team only won 83 games and they missed the playoffs. And and like you said, Evan, Stearns, the biggest thing he preached probably in that in that media thing he did after the season ended was run prevention. And I believe, because that was the biggest thing he was talking about, I believe you see major changes to the roster. I'm talking, I don't think Mark Vientos is going to be here next year. Jeff McNeil, I probably don't think he's going to be here either. And I know, since he came off a relatively decent season, at least something he improved upon from 2024, that probably makes his contract a little bit easier to move. If Pete Alonso is brought back, what is his role? Is it going to be at first base? Is it going to be at DH? And obviously, like you said, with the outfielder spots, obviously center field. Obviously, center field, someone else is gonna have a major say on that, because he's the all hail king of center fielders. And then what do you do with your corner outfielders? Obviously, you have Juan Soto for 14 more years, so he's not going anywhere. Do you keep him in right field? Do you move him to first base? And then Brandon Nimmo. Listen, I know Brandon Nimmo is going to be a big discussion point for us this offseason on podcast, because do you move him, or if he stays, again, similar to Juan Soto, do you maybe move him to a DH spot, or do you move him to first base? So there's going to be a lot of major question marks, because obviously there is guys who you're going to keep in their position. Obviously, Francisco Lindor, who is one of our better players, even though he didn't have a great defensive year last year. He made a lot of simple mistakes, but he's going to stay at the shortstop position. Francisco Alvarez and Luis Torrens, they are, even though they do have their hitting problems in terms of consistency sometimes, those two guys are reliable defensively. And then, third base, again, that's going to be another option. What do the Mets do with Ronnie Mauricio? Did Brett Beatty do enough this year to cement his spot at third base going to next year and beyond? So there's going to be a lot of questions asked about this team, and there's going to be a lot of this hard decision that David Stearns is going to have to make going into this offseason.
Yeah, and that's where, once we get further in the offseason, we'll talk about potentially fits for the roster and everything. Just guys that they could bring in, guys that they might take a look at. But it really comes down to being better defensively and getting more lineup depth. I think those are really the main things. And this doesn't tell the full story, but I just pulled up teams' ranks for DRS from the season. There is only one team that is still playing baseball right now with a worse DRS this season than the Mets. Could you name the team?
I would assume it's the Yankees.
It is not the Yankees. The Yankees actually had a better DRS, surprisingly.
The Phillies?
The Phillies, yep. So, and those are two teams that are on the cusp of getting eliminated, but a team that looks poised to potentially go to the World Series for a second straight year and potentially win for a second straight year. They were third in DRS. The Toronto Blue Jays, who look good, were fourth in DRS. The Cubs, while they are on the brink of getting eliminated, they were second in DRS. The Brewers were 12th, which surprised me a little bit, but the Mets ranked 15th in the league. And I just want to look at OAA as well. Um, yeah, the Mets were 21st in OAA with a dash 13. That's just not good enough. I mean, they simply need to be better defensively next year. And again, that's something that I talked about, which is why, you hear the rumors, even though Cody Bellinger is someone that has not had a great postseason, you hear the Mets connected to him because, and I think the difference though is, I think Cody Bellinger fit wise, not that I want to get too in depth with players just yet because it's still early in the offseason. We haven't hit free agency, but like just to talk about him a little bit because I feel like that's a guy that the Mets have been connected to even throughout the season. Uh, when you talk about him, I think fit wise, it's better than him with the Yankees because if you have him hitting lower in the lineup, because right now with the Yankees, he's supposed to be like their third or fourth best hitter. Here, if he's buried towards the bottom, not bottom of the lineup, but like if you have him hitting fifth or sixth in the lineup here while bringing you good defense, I think that's something that you really should take a look at. But obviously, it depends, are you bringing Pete back? Because if not, then and you're relying on him to be kind of like your fourth or even third best hitter, that's when we have problems. But just wanted to, bring that up because that's a name. I mean, Alex Bregman's another name that everyone's talking about as well, which I don't know how I feel about that, but expect them to target those guys. Like, as much as, even though Kyle Schwarber's having a bad playoffs, which is making me raise questions about him, but as much as I talked about, wanting Kyle Schwarber in the past, I don't know realistically if that's someone they're going to target because I think they view if they bring back Pete Alonso, that's our DH. How could we improve the defense in the infield and in other areas?
Yeah, that's my. I think for the offense point of view, I think that's maybe my biggest question mark is how does David Stearns want to address the DH? Like, because again, we've seen in 2024 he went the JD Martinez route, and then even then by the end of the regular season, because remember they already brought in Jesse Winker by the trade deadline, so you went from JD Martinez being your full time DH at the start of the year to doing a platoon situation with him and Winker by the end of the year, and even then. By the time the playoffs rolled around, Jesse Winker was more of the full time DH than JD Martinez was. But at least, for JD Martinez, he was still offering at least some value because he was actually doing the role of hitting coach, unlike someone else who currently lost their job. And then even we saw last year because of the whole Stalling Marte situation and with his contract, and because David Stearns was unable to move that contract, the Mets again had to go on a route where they went through this platoon role of doing Stalling Marte and Jesse Winker. And then Winker ended up again getting hurt midway through the year, and then pretty much Marte was the full time DH. Also splitting time with Mark Vientos. But again, it's like with Stearns because he's gonna have a lot of money available to him this offseason, and you're gonna have a lot of key guy coming off the books, especially with a guy like Pete Alonso. So and Marte's also gone as well, so that's another $20 million
And
coming
potentially
off your books.
Diaz opting out.
Yeah, and Edwin Diaz potentially opting as well. So like I said, my biggest question is how does Stearns want to address the DH role? Because again, if you're bringing back Pete Alonso, and I know we're going to discuss this more, but for me, I'm not opposed to bringing back Pete Alonso, even though I think there should be a change to the core, whether it's some guys, because I know, listen, Lindor and Soto, those guys are staying. They're locked up long term. They're signed to big money. They are not going anywhere. Pete Alonso, he's a free agent. Okay, I'm not opposed to bringing back Pete Alonso as long as the contract makes sense and also his role makes sense as well. And then the other big one, in terms of the Fat Four, right, is Brandon Nimmo, and we'll see if the Mets do end up trying to moving him. I know it's a little bit difficult because he's making $20 million a year and he has a no trade clause as well. But if you're bringing back Pete Alonso for me, and I know I forgot where I heard this from, but there were rumors saying that the Mets and David Stearns they're open to bringing back Pete Alonso as long as it's more in a DH role. And for me, that's where I fully agree because listen, I know that Pete is not a complete butcher at first base, but again, when you have David Stearns talking about run prevention, and again like that was a big talking point in his press conference. I just don't see how you could have Pete Alonso back at first base because then he makes too many simple mistakes. I mean, how many times does he cost runs because he can't make that simple throw over to first base where when the pitcher's trying to cover, or how many times when he fields a ball first base and you have to turn a quick double play, how many times does he overthrow that throw to second base? Like he just and listen, I get that he makes a lot of great scoop plays, he makes some great diving plays, but to me, like it's cool that you can make those hard plays, but for me, when you can't make those simple plays, and majority of the time when you're playing first base, you have to make those simple plays. I just don't trust you at first base at that point. But if Pete Alonso wants to come back, and again, if the Mets are open to bringing him back, if the contract makes sense and you're playing him as more of a full time DH role, then I fully agree. But again, like I said, that comes down to how does David Stearns want to handle DH role? Because again, a guy like Kyle Schwarber is out there as well. And again, like if you're bringing in Kyle Schwarber, you know that he's only DHing. I mean, I know he could. I know for the Phillies this year, he's played a couple games in the outfield, but majority of his playing time has come at the DH role. And then also, like you mentioned before with Cody Bellinger. Listen, I think for me, Bellinger would be a good add to this team, and part of the reason it is because he's very versatile. He can play center field, he can play left field, he could play first base. He could even DH a little bit if you want to do that as well. So, like I said, for me, how Stearns is going to approach the DH role, that's going to be very telling for me of how this offseason, at least what his offseason plans for the offense is going to be.
Yeah, especially because last year if everyone remembers, they tried to move Starling Marte, did not happen, and they were in talks to potentially get Jock Peterson, who didn't have a good year, or Teoscar Hernandez, who ended up, getting a better deal from the Dodgers, or he might have even took a pay cut to stay with the Dodgers just because he likes being there. I forgot which one it was, but
He deferred,
nonetheless,
he deferred money to stay there.
that's right. Yeah, he deferred money, so the Mets couldn't end up landing Teoscar Hernandez. So the Mets need to find, like you said, they need to find a solution at DH because I'm so tired of the platoon crap. But that's where it's tricky because it's like you need to address run prevention. You need to address your DH spot. You have a rotation to address. Like there is a lot here. Sorry, guys. There's a lot here you have to address. And the thing, this is really the biggest problem though that I have is the guy that they really need to move is Brandon Nimmo, but I don't know how you're doing it when he has the no trade clause. And I don't think I don't know if I agree with the money being as much of an issue. I think teams are going to view what he did this year and even last year and say, okay, at least we're getting a good offensive player. And the numbers say he's average defensively. Obviously, we watched him play and he didn't look that way. But there will be teams I feel like that would take that contract. I just don't know if he's going to waive the no trade clause. I think that's your bigger issue. But that's the guy to me you need to move more because I would be comfortable. I'd be fully on board with bringing Pete back if Brandon Nimmo was gone because then you still have your financial flexibility to improve other areas. To me, the problem is what could you do if you bring back Pete and you can't move Nimmo? Because then you're bringing back the same roster and you need to address a lot of areas.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing for me. And again, this goes along with the DH role because for me, depending on who you get rid of, so like let's say like if for example Pete goes and Nimmo stays, I think then there's a discussion point of maybe moving Brandon Nimmo over to DH more instead of moving him over to the first base role because again that's a whole new defensive role that he would have to learn. And then let's say, for example, if you move Brandon Nimmo, you could obviously move Pete over to a DH role. And again, he fits more of that role. But I think, because the biggest point, when you compare both guys as DH DH roles, for example, right? For me, I would rather trade Nimmo at that point and have Pete Alonso more as my DH because again, Pete fits more of that stereotypical role of being a DH. Because listen, I know that Brandon Nimmo has a decent bat. I mean, again, when you look at the stats, like the guy hit 90, the guy brung in 92 RBIs last year. He hit 25 home runs, so he could do that DH role. I'm not saying that he can't do it, but for me, just looking more at Alonso's stats, and again, he fits more of that stereotypical role because again, hit 38 home runs last year, brung in 126 RBIs, 347 OBS or OBP, 524 slugging, 871 OPS as well. And we know that Pete Alonso has more of that power potential. And even now, if you actually bring in a competent hitting coach who actually preaches hitting the ball hard and pulling the ball, actually, you could see Pete Alonso get back to what we were seeing in 2019, where he was hitting 53 home runs, where he was hitting, high 40 home runs, or like I said, the low 50 home runs. So for me, and I agree with you, I think Brandon Nimmo is more of the guy that you want to move going to this year. It's just, again, are you going to be able to do it? And I agree with you. I think the no movement clause is going to be harder to navigate around. The reason why I think the money might be a little bit difficult is just because what teams are going to be after Brandon Nimmo, because again with the no trade clause as well. It's like, okay, like a bad team could be interested in trading for him, but then again, why would Brandon Nimmo waive to go to a bad team? Like again, I know he's from Wyoming, but I believe he grew up a Rockies fan. Like again, if the Rockies were interested in trading for Brandon Nimmo, why the hell would he waive to go to Colorado? And they already have one bad contract in Chris Bryant. So why would that ownership group and that owner, take on another, fairly not great contract as well? And then especially, with, if you trade him to a better team per se, what are you getting back in that situation? Are the Mets going to have to what's it called? Well, are they going to have to take back some money as well, in terms of, maybe, taking that contract 80, 80-20, or 70-30? So there's a lot of question marks on how you're going to be able to move Brandon Nimmo. I think the more realistic option per se would be you move Brandon Nimmo to a team, and then let's say you take on another, you take on, let's say, maybe another contract as well to kind of offset the money a little bit, and then even then maybe you still take back some money as well from Brandon Nimmo's contract. So it's going to be interesting how they do it, and because I'm sure teams will be interested in trading for Brandon Nimmo. It's just, again, how are you going to be able to organize a deal, and then of course, as well, get him to waive his no trade clause as well? I think that's the biggest question mark for me.
I mean, I could tell you potentially two suitors for Brandon Nimmo, and I don't know. Obviously, again, only he would know if he would waive for these spots, so I'm not even going to sit here and tell you he would. But two teams that I look at as potential fits for Brandon Nimmo, one of them being a crosstown rival in the Yankees, where if they lose Cody Bellinger and, say they're not able to land, if they are in the Kyle Tucker sweepstakes, I don't know if they will be, but say they're not able to, maybe that's an option. And that also opens up another idea. If Kyle Tucker leaves the Cubs, maybe that's an option for a team. And maybe he'd waive to go there since they're a competitive team. The Seattle Mariners are a team that is starving for offensive help. Maybe that's a team. But like you said, it really is, does money need to come back in that scenario? Like, is their team comfortable enough to where they could take that money? The good news is, with a team like the Mariners, is they could be an option because of a certain contract they have coming off the books. If you look at their contract situation, Mitch Garver at 12.5 million comes off the books. There's a mutual option, and the Mariners are obviously not going to pick that up, considering Cal Raleigh's Cal Raleigh, and they could find a suitable backup option for a hell of a lot cheaper. If maybe there's a world where you could say, where the Mariners are thinking maybe, okay, let's go get Brandon Nimmo, because we're essentially giving him $11 million, or less than that. Actually, it would be what, like $9 or $10 million, because we're losing Mitch Garver and then we're replacing that bat, if you will, with Brandon Nimmo. Like, maybe that is potentially an option. And then Randy's in his last year of arbitration, so maybe they end up wanting to move Randy. I'm just spitballing an idea. Again, this is just like bar talk, bar room conversation here, where it's like, let's see what, throw shit at the wall, see if it sticks type thing. But, that's potentially an option as an idea. Again, it's really just, will Nimmo waive for any of these places? That's why I think that's the main concern over anything, is I think he loves being a Met so much to where I don't know. But there's also something to be said, and we've talked about this with hockey a lot, where if you tell a player, we don't view you in our plans anymore, that might entice a player to say, you know what, if they don't want me here, why do I want to be here? Kind of thing, which again, only Nimmo will be able to give the answer on if he feels comfortable with that. But I'm just spitballing here with that. And all I know is that they have to at least have the conversation. Like to me, you can't go this off season without having the conversation with him about waiving because then that's just not good general managing by David Stearns unless the only way it is fine with me to not have that conversation is if Steve Cohen is so willing to go beyond the payroll that that they have right now and get really out of the comfort zone. If he's willing to do that, then fine. I'm okay with Nimmo staying here and not having that talk. But I don't know. To me, you have to because that's the guy where you can improve defensively in that area. You can improve by getting a similar bat or more consistent bat in a guy like Cody Bellinger, like we said, or whoever it may be out there in left field.
Yeah, I mean,
Or
look,
maybe, and sorry to cut you off before,
I,
and before I let you go, or maybe moving Juan Soto to left field since left field's a little bit easier to play, in my opinion, than right field.
no, that could definitely be an option. But I mean, just going back to the Steve Cohen point of view, I mean, I mean, listen, I could definitely see there being an option where Steve Cohen just gets completely pissed off of this year, and we've seen it before where he kind of goes, rage spending, especially what was it, the 2021 offseason where Steven Matz declined to go there, and then he just went on a spending rampage with bringing guys like Scherzer, Marte, Escobar, Canna. So it could definitely happen, and again, like because let's not forget, like Steve Cohen gave David Stearns all basically the financial flexibility, and he gave him all the resources, to build a good baseball team. And obviously this team just had a disastrous year and not make the playoffs. So I could definitely see Steve Cohen opening up the checkbook a little bit more and giving him just a little bit more financial flexibility. And I believe there will be discussions as well because I also believe that Cohen is definitely not happy with Stearns as well because again, this team should have made the playoffs. So we'll definitely see. But I definitely do think with David Stearns, just the way he was speaking again in that press conference and more of the way he usually builds baseball teams, like the way we saw him build teams in Milwaukee, he will definitely have conversations and he will definitely look at every single option to improve this team because again, like there was just too many holes, like you said, especially with the lack of speed per se. And I know they stole a lot of bases, but I think that was just more to good coaching from Anton Richardson. Like I said, improve the speed, improve the fundamentals, improve the hitting. And like I said, improve the fielding as well. I believe he will look at every single option to improve this team. And I don't believe, apart from the guys that are locked up long term here, like I said, with Juan Soto and Francisco Lindor, I don't believe pretty much anyone is safe. And also that takes in part to the guys that let's say are not on great contracts as well. Because I believe like a guy like Sean Manaea, I don't think he's movable just because again like $25 million and he just came off a year where he put up a 5.6 ERA. So I don't believe that contract is movable. So apart from those guys, I believe everyone that is movable, there will at least be discussions, around okay, where can we move these guys, and if we can, what can we get, what can we get back for them, and then if we are able to move that money off the books, where can we spend that money to better build the team and solidify it a lot more better than the team was last year. But I mean, like you brought up with the Mariners point, the Mariners could be a sneaky under the radar target.
This is why as well. This idea from
Yeah,
Armand in the chat.
yeah, you could trade him for Luis Castillo again to offset the money. But even with the Mariners outfield construction, because again you have Julio Rodriguez who's playing center field there, you have Randy Arozarena right now who's playing left field, and then you kind of have a platoon option of guys like Luke Raley and a couple other guys who are holding down the right field spot. But then when you go on Baseball Savant and you compare the defensive metrics, right now Randy Arozarena, at least for this year, he was graded out as a 9th percentile, -6 range in terms of OAA. And then when you compare that in terms of Brandon Nimmo, he's ranked in the 43rd percentile at a -1. So, and we know that Randy Arozarena, when he gets hot, he has a very good bat. I believe if the Mariners want to do this, you could trade for a guy like Brandon Nimmo, and then again because the Mariners are going to be competitive next year because they have a deep pitching staff in terms of their starting rotation, and then in terms of their bullpen as well. Like I said, they're going to want to be competitive. So maybe you move Randy Arozarena to DH, and then you slot in Brandon Nimmo into the left field. And we know that that T-Mobile Park is more of a bigger outfield, and it's more of a pitchers friendly park. So again, you want the improved defense out there in left field. So that definitely could be an option.
Yeah, and you know, like I said with the Garver thing, because I know that Armand's bringing up this point about not willing to spend money, but like I said, if you have money coming off the books with Garver, and yeah, again, like your idea here, Castillo potentially, I think that would be the most realistic scenario. Is you see a trade where Castillo is someone that the Mariners don't really need in either way. They're probably going to want to open up some financial flexibility to pay Gilbert at some point, which I'm not sure, or at least one of their young starters, because they're going to have to pay these guys at some point. But maybe that is the route, is something along those lines. And again, maybe teams like the Cubs are an option if they lose Tucker, like I mentioned, since they're at least going to make a bid, so that tells me financially they can make it work. For me, I think it really comes down to the best case scenario, honestly, could be wait the market out with Kyle Tucker, see where he signs, and then find a team that was in the sweepstakes that's desperate, and then you trade him there because another team that could be in the sweepstakes is the Dodgers. And do you trade Nimmo there? I don't know. I mean, that's a destination where I feel like he would waive for, because who wouldn't waive for the Dodgers? Like who the fuck wouldn't? Um, but nonetheless, we've talked a lot about Nimmo. I do want to get to some other comments in the chat here. Uh, this one, Schwarber 0 for 23. That's where I said, I don't know how I feel about Schwarber like I once did. He's kind of been a mouse in the playoffs. But there were a couple other good comments here that I wanted to address. Where is the one that I want to pull up? I mean, there were some comments about Vientos as DH. No, Vientos can't be here next year. If that's your DH option, you might as well bring Starling Marte back. It's just you need an upgrade. To me, this was one of the comments, and we'll never know. But Carson and I talked about this a little bit, that McNeil potentially being a problem in the clubhouse. To me, him and Senga are the locks to get moved. I think there's no way either of them are back next year.
Yeah, listen, again with the McNeil point, I think he's a good player, but I think it's one of those things where his time it's ran its course here. I mean, listen, the guy came up in 2018, had a good pretty much half a season 2018. Again, 2019 was good. 2020 was solid, fell off a little bit in 2021, obviously won the batting title in 22. And then he's kind of been stagnant ever since then. I know he had a much better year this year. So I think because he had that better year this year, I believe it's going to be a lot more easier to move his contract. And again, it's only one more year for $15 million. And I believe he has another year as well after that, but it is a club option. So again, like the team that trades for him, they do have that say on whether they want to bring him back or not. But yeah, I definitely do think McNeil is in conversation to get traded. And even at the trade deadline, we even heard rumors that the Mets were potentially looking to move McNeil to maybe even, improve some of their offense in other spots as well. So I believe McNeil is going to be gone as well this offseason. And again, like you free up $50 million in payroll, you can do a lot with that money as well. And then you're going to have to make changes to the starting rotation. And again, like you're going to have to move on from some guys as well. I know Montas is not going to be here next year. Technically, he'll be under contract, but the guy's having Tommy John surgery, and I don't even want to see him put on a Mets uniform anymore. I don't even want to see him wear any clothes associated with the Mets. So
I think they get financial relief as well from him not pitching.
Yeah, hopefully they can for that as well. But yeah, I mean, and then listen, like I said, with Minaya, he signed you for 2 more years at $25 million. He's not getting moved. And then, you look at their other guys, a lot of their other guys, they're more the rookies. Obviously, Nolan McLean, he's going to be here next year. He's going to start the season up in the majors unless some catastrophic thing happens. Brandon Sproat, 50-50 about that. There's a chance that he might start in AAA. I'm leaning towards, though, if he does have a good spring training, he'll probably start the year up here with the major league squad. Jonathan, though, I think that's pretty much the lock for him. He's going to start the year in AAA, and again, he needs a lot more time in AAA because you could just see from the short time that he came up here, he needs a bit more time to just over marinate down there, and he needs a couple more starts. But yeah, if you're going to move one guy from the starting rotation, it's Kodai Senga. And listen, for me, I still think listen, I still don't think Kodai Senga is as bad as what we saw in the second half of the year, but I don't think he was ever as good as what we saw, mostly for 2023 and what we were seeing at the start of the year. Like him pitching to a sub 2 ERA, like I don't think he's ever at that level. I believe Senga is at, that lower end 2 to borderline 3 status pitcher. But again, even though I'm not moving Senga based off his skill set, the reason for me why I'm a lot more open now to trading Kodai Senga, I just can't deal anymore. I can't deal anymore with the maintenance. I mean, these small little niggles, and then even like the thing you brought up, I believe it was on one of the post game shows you did. When we were hearing things about him dealing with heat fatigue, I mean, dude, like, come
That's what
on,
I was
man.
about to say.
I mean, seriously, Kodai Senga is as durable as a cheaply made condom. Like the guy breaks just easily. I can't do it with him anymore. And again, like I was saying, I don't believe Senga is as bad as what he showed in the second half this year. Like I don't believe he's a 5.6 ERA pitcher. But again, like when you're that breakable and when you're not that durable as a starting pitcher, and especially when the Mets were making so many adjustments for him specifically, like having the 6-man rotation and then moving him back a couple starts and then even moving some guys up a couple starts. If I can't pencil you in for 30 starts, and even like David Stearns, he got that question about Kodai Senga in his press conference, and he's like, is it smart to pencil in Kodai Senga for 30 or more starts next year? And he's like, no, that would be silly of us to even project that. So again, he has 2 more years left at $50 million. I don't know if you trade him, let's say, I don't know if you're going to have to maybe retain some money as well. Maybe, take back half that contract as well. So, you cover 15 million and then the team that takes him on covers $15 million. So I'm interested to see, how the Mets can facilitate that trade as well. But it's just, for me, like I said, I can't do it with the maintenance anymore for Senga.
Yeah, and you could read between the lines with what Stern said. Like it's over with him here. Like there's no way around it. Basically giving what Cashman said about Stanton, like, yeah, injuries are part of his game, type quote. But just given the fact that they couldn't even guarantee if they got to the playoffs, he would be on the playoff roster. We're done here with Senga. Like it's just it is what it is. And even with the way he talked about it, it was kind of like, yeah, let's hype him up a little bit, but also throw in the fact, yeah, he can't make enough starts. So that is what it is. I mean, that was the whole, like I said for a bit, that was the concern with Senga coming over here is injuries were a thing. In terms of some other comments here, is Alonso willing to be a DH? This is where Cohen has to open his wallet. And to me, Alonso's going to take the most money out there. And if it's from the Mets and he's DHing, it's going to be that. And if he wants to take less because the Mets are telling him you're going to DH more here, then so be it. Then he's going to walk. I mean, it's really that simple.
Yeah, listen, you have to do what's best for this team. And listen, I know that people love Pete Alonso. I know he's a fan favorite. I know he broke the home run record last year, passing Darryl Strawberry. But again, you have to make moves and you have to bring back guys or move out guys that's going to benefit the roster and benefit the team. And again, when you have David Stearns, who his main talking point was run prevention, I'm sorry. And listen, I like I brought up before, I get that Pete Alonso was not a butcher at first base, but again, when you can't make these simple plays, like simple like fielding ground balls or making the simple throw over to first base when the pitcher's trying to cover first base, I'm sorry, like, because there was too many times last year where those errors either led to runs being scored or led to the Mets leaving the door open, and then teams would capitalize off those errors. And again, like I said, when David Stearns' biggest talking point of the press conference was run prevention, I don't believe you could have Pete Alonso back at first base. And again, if the Mets give him enough money and give him enough term in terms of years on that contract, I think he should be willing to come back in DH because again, it's less fatigue on your body. And again, if you bring in an actual hitting coach that actually praises, actually pulling the ball and hitting the ball hard, again, you're going to see Pete Alonso go back, or you can see Pete Alonso go back to what we saw back in 2019 and those early 2020 years where he was hitting 50, he was hitting low 50 home run totals or high 40 home run totals. So for me, I don't see why Pete Alonso wouldn't want a DH. But again, that's his choice, because I know we've heard the rumors as well that Pete Alonso, his goal is to one day win a Gold Glove. And listen, Pete, I'm sorry, I get that you want to set that goal for yourself, but bro, when you can't make throws over to first base, you're not winning a Gold Glove anytime soon. Like it's just as simple as that. So for me, like I said, I don't know why he wouldn't want to be open to DHing. Maybe there's an exception to where if he goes somewhere else, he would want to be a first baseman. But maybe because he loves being a Met so much, maybe he would be willing to compromise and take the DH role. And of course, maybe if Cohen is willing to give him a little bit more money on top of that to do that role, then I could easily see it. But ultimately, like I said, Stearns is going to do what's best for this team. And obviously, the number one goal, at least for this offseason, I know there's a lot of things that need to be addressed, like pitching needs to be addressed, hitting needs to be addressed. But the main thing, like we said, because if the defense was just a little bit better, specifically in the National Series or even a couple series before, the Mets probably do get into the playoffs. So for me, and even like when you look at Milwaukee, like when Stearns was in Milwaukee, his biggest thing was defense, run prevention. So, and like I said, I believe that's going to be the number one target that's going to be addressed. And like I said, if Pete Alonso wants to be a first baseman, I don't see him being back. I don't see him being back here next year.
And I see this now. You just commented again, pretty much game for war, that you laugh at the people who only want Pete if he's willing to DH. For who is he moving away from first base? Vientos, who is magical. Who is this magical first baseman who could play first base better? Clifford. That's for David Stearns to evaluate, not us. And if he is signing Pete as a DH, then he has some sort of plan at first base. And I'm not telling you it's going to be better. I'm not telling you it's going to work. I'm just telling you the message that we are getting from David Stearns, which is run prevention. And if they view someone as a more viable option, could it be if they sign Alex Bregman? Could that be who they view playing first base? Could they view, and then Beatty sticks at third? Could they view Beatty playing first and Bregman plays third base if they sign him? Like, is that an option? Cody Bellinger, if they sign him and you keep the corner outfielders together, is Cody Bellinger playing first base? Could they maybe move Brandon Nimmo? And I know it sounds silly to say it, but maybe if they keep Brandon Nimmo around and sign Bellinger, maybe you give Brandon Nimmo reps at first base, which I don't know how that's going to go. Again, I'm not telling you it's going to work, but I'm just saying, and I'm just relaying the message here from the man at the top that they want to focus on defense. And one of the ways you improve, in my opinion, is you give Pete more DH reps, like it's been reported, and Stearns has to find a guy that could be just as good, if not better there. And again, I'm not telling you I have the answer, but we'll see what the answer may be. Maybe they go out and sign Josh Naylor. That's a free agent this offseason. Maybe that's a guy that they end up targeting who doesn't have the greatest metrics, but he's average at first base from the metrics, where Pete Alonso is dog shit according to the metrics. So is that the option? I don't know. But all I know is that David Stearns is going to have to, again, he has his work cut out for him a lot this offseason. And this is what is we're going to learn a lot about Stearns. We're going to learn a lot. And sure, it could be a negotiation tactic. I don't know. But all I know is that, again, we're just having a conversation here about it. And I'm not opposed to either one. Whatever the front office decision is, it is what it is. But all I know is that this team has to get better defensively, whether it's whether it's the corner outfields, whatever it may be. They have to get better defensively.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. I mean, listen, like you said, we're going to learn about David Stearns, or we're going to learn a lot about David Stearns this year because, like I said, he has a lot of work for him cut out this year. Listen, for me, and I know maybe some people don't feel the same way. I trust Stearns to turn it around because for me, even coming off this last year, I believe he built a team that was good enough to at least make the playoffs. Now, for me, he didn't build a team that was good enough to win a World Series, which was the ultimate goal. That's something that he needs to fix. But listen, I believe he's smart enough. I believe he's going to learn from his mistakes from last year in terms of not being aggressive enough with the pitching staff, not being aggressive enough with some bullpen options, and then obviously, obviously fixing the mistakes with this offense and then fixing the mistakes with this defense. But like I said, we're going to learn about David Stearns this year. And I believe for me, I mean, could he get fired after this year? He certainly could, because I mean, if you have back-to-back years where you don't make the playoffs, I mean, your job has to be a serious risk. And for me, listen, for me, and we were even talking about this before the regular season even ended. For me, the reason why Stearns is still employed for me is because I trust him to fix this. Because for me, if I didn't trust him at all, he would have already been gone. This for me would have been like a Billy Alper situation where it was 2 years, see you, goodbye. You just came off a disastrous year, goodbye, see you later. But because of what he did in Milwaukee and because how well he turned that franchise into what they are now, I am willing to give him this year to fix his mistakes. And if he does, cool, we'll continue on. But if not, and we have another disastrous year where we miss the playoffs again, and the defense is not good and the pitching is not good, and the offense is inconsistent like what we saw this year, like what we saw this past season, then there will need to be a discussion to be had of if do you fire David Stearns. But until then, like I said, it's going to be a busy offseason. It's going to be a lot to talk about in terms of who you move, in terms of who you bring in to replace those guys that you do move on from. But listen, like people were saying, like who do you bring in for this spot? Who do you bring for this spot? Listen, that's not our job to do. That's David Stearns' job. We can talk about options, we can discuss certain options, but ultimately, we're not the ones who make the final decisions at the end of the day in terms of who's going to be on this roster or not. So, like I said, for Stearns, it's going to be a busy offseason for him, and we'll see what happens. I trust him, and hopefully, he learns from what he did wrong last year.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with Max on this that I although I disagree a bit, and this is where Matt and I disagree, that I don't necessarily trust him because it's hard for me to after the way this season went. Um, I don't trust him, but I'm hoping he proves me wrong. Like that's all it really comes down to, and I'm hoping he can regain my trust. That's really what it is. It's really a thing where I don't have a choice but to hope he can make me regain it, and it's not going to be easy, but that's what it's going to come down to at this point. In terms of just other comments, just because I want to get to a few more before we wrap things up here. Doug asking what we think about Manny Ramirez for a hitting coach option. I don't really have strong feelings because I don't know his hitting philosophy. To me, it comes down to that. Obviously a great MLB career, but that doesn't necessarily translate to being a good coach. I mean, we've talked about it. Wayne Gretzky, best hockey player of all time, not a good coach. So like, you never know with those things. I would need to know his hitting philosophy before I'm on board with that.
Yeah, same for me. I don't have an opinion per se, and I don't know, has Manny Ramirez even had a coaching role at the MLB
Yeah, he
level?
was a hitting consultant, I believe, with the Cubs for a bit at some
Okay,
point.
so but yeah, like what you're saying, I don't really know his hitting philosophy all too well. Obviously, that's going to be if he is being interviewed for that role. Obviously, you're going to learn about it and you're going to ask certain questions about that during the interview process. But for me, like I said, I don't have an opinion on it. If he's brought in to be a hitting coach, then cool. I'll trust Stearns on that decision. But like I said, I don't have an overall opinion on that.
Yeah, it's like the same thing because I've seen a few of the Edgardo Alfonso comments as well. I don't have an opinion because I don't know what their hitting philosophy would be. Like, I need to hear from the horse's mouth, which I'm hoping to not hear as much like we did with Chavez, but that's a different conversation. Last two comments that I've starred here. Vientos is a potential to hit 30 home runs with decent hitting coach to fix damage. Chavez did. Um, you don't want a 30 home run plus DH. Is he that though? The problem is, could you go into the next year with that being a question mark? How many years in a row do you want to go into or how many seasons in a row, I should say, do you want to go into the year and say, okay, we have this, the DH. Could it work? Like, I want to eliminate that question mark. That's really what it comes down to. And that's another thing where I feel like I don't think Stearns wants to keep Vientos around. I don't. Based on how little he played down the stretch and Ronnie Mauricio playing over him, of all people. And again, we talk about that run prevention thing. I don't think that I don't think he's staying. I just don't think he is.
No. No, I don't think Vientos is coming back next year. Because even then, like, if you guys remember the 2024 before that season started, Mark Vientos actually had a decent spring training, and he was cut before that season even started. So even then from early on, Stearns really didn't have a lot of faith in Mark Vientos. It was only then because the Mets were struggling so bad at that point, they had to make certain call ups, and Vientos got off to that hot stretch into that hot start, and he forces Wynn to that lineup. But then, we saw going into this year, obviously because, the more you play, the more, pitching rotations around the league and pitching teams, they're going to make adjustments on how to better attack you and to how to, figure out how to get you out more easily. And obviously, we saw pitching staffs make those adjustments, but we didn't see Vientos make those adjustments back to those other pitching staffs. Now, look, maybe is that due to the fact that just Chavez was not doing his job, and he's a terrible hitting coach? That could be an option. Listen, I'm not sitting here and saying that Vientos. I'm not saying that Vientos could not get back to that 30 home run mark, but I agree with you, Evan. It's just with how bad the season was last year, and because this team has to get back to that level of being a competitive team again. I think that is just way too big of a question mark to go into next year saying, okay, can Mark Vientos get back to what he was in 2024? And also, like you mentioned, because he doesn't have any defensive versatility to him whatsoever, again, that's just another reason why I think Stark just doesn't bring him back next year.
And like, I'm not disagreeing with this thought, game for war, but the problem is you have to move at least one or two of these guys, in my opinion. And to me, Alvarez isn't going anywhere. I want to see what he could do with a good hitting coach. Brett Beatty, after the year he had, I still don't have full hope, but I'm interested a little bit with a good hitting coach. And the main thing is, at least he plays solid defense. And even Mauricio, even though he had a lot of blunders, especially in the last series, at least we've seen him play good defense in the past. The thing that, Carson's talked about it, Frank has talked about, like, all of us have talked about it. When we did our deadline stream, potentially trading Vientos for Robert, we all came to the agreement where at least if they traded Vientos for Robert, at least when Robert is not hitting, he's playing good defense. Mark Vientos is useless when he's not hitting because he's so bad defensively, to where I don't know if you could take that gamble. If they were able to start the year with him in AAA, I would be more than okay with keeping him around, but he doesn't have options anymore, to where this is the hand you're dealt, and now I think you got to move on. I really do. And if it works out for him somewhere else, good for him. But I just don't think the Mets are in a spot to where they can take that gamble. And if they do, then we have to hope it works. But I just don't think they're in that spot to do it.
Yeah, 100%. I just think it's too big of a risk to bring him back next year and just to hope and sit and rely on him that he's going to, get back to that 2024 Vientos. Again, for me, I think for me, and like I just brought up, I believe if Vientos was at least competent at third base, I believe there will be a chance for him to at least try to attain that DH role. But like we said, and like what I just stated, and like what you just stated, because he just has no defensive versatility whatsoever, I believe that's just the main reason why Stearns is not going to bring, or at least he's going to trade him away. Because I believe a lot of the guys that Stearns is going to bring in this year, they're going to have at least defensive versatility to them. I believe the only two guys I could see Stearns targeting this year that they don't really have any defensive versatility whatsoever is one, Pete Alonso, if he agrees to be a DH option mostly. Obviously, he's going to play first base a little bit because obviously you're going to have to rest some guys as well. And then the second one being Kyle Schwarber, who's going to be pretty much full-time DH. Maybe he plays the outfield for a game or two here and there because, again, guys are going to need rest. That's the only two options I see. where Stearns brings in guys where they have little to no defensive versatility. Other than that, I expect everyone to at least have some level of defensive versatility, and I expect them to at least be at a competent level for defense.
Yeah, and unless there's another DH that we don't have in mind, um, I share that same sentiment. Yeah, like if there's a trade target that we don't see coming, maybe. And then the last comment I wanted to get to is from Armon here that Murakami could be a potential option at first base. He's not good at third base defensively, so moving him to first and the MLB is an option. Stearns has scouted him. I'm not as high on Murakami as I was based on things that I read up on. And again, I don't know how true it is. This is just things I've read up on that he is atrocious um at hitting fastballs and hitting pitches like over 93 or 94 miles an hour. And if that's the case, then no thank you. We already have enough of that at home here.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Listen, again, like I haven't watched Murakami. Like I didn't even watch highlights, and again, like just going based off what what we were reading about him. Like even though Stearns was scouting him, like again, just because you're scouting someone doesn't mean you're fully interested in bringing in that player. But yeah, I mean, if that's the real concerns about Murakami, that he can't hit fastballs over 93 and he struggles just hitting fastballs in general, then I'm sorry, I have no interest in bringing in Murakami here.
Yeah, 100%. And again, I don't want to sit here and tell you. I haven't watched them play to know how true it is. So I can't sit here and tell you it's for certain the case, but if I saw something about like how he has a really low OPS against fastballs and just high velocity. And again, if that's the case, then I'm good on that. But nonetheless, we are going to wrap things up here. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in and watching. Leave a like if you enjoyed the episode. Subscribe if you guys are new to the channel. Turn on your notifications so you know when we upload or go live next. And we'll see you guys in the next one.